This week on London Real, Max Keiser is back to talk crowdfunding and George Galloway's run for mayor of London.
Raise a million, X number of thousands of people want this. They want me as mayor. This is the target. And either it's yes or no. It's a binary outcome. It's a serious attempt, again, to disrupt this political process, which everyone agrees is completely corrupted by big business, big corporations. There's the mayor's office, and then there's the mayor's public relations office. And it's a parade all day long of big business, right, coming through that office, looking to do deals. Boris Johnson's over in China in a helicopter and saying Chinese people come to London. Well, what about all the jobs that ended up going to China?
London Real presents Max Keiser, crowdfunding.
Let's see what the people want, not what the people are going to be sold through the corruption of the BBC.
I am here at the offices of the Mayor of London to give Boris Johnson a simple message that Max Keiser and George Galloway are about to crowdfund you straight out of office. This week on the show, we are talking about crowdfunding, but not equity crowdfunding, or not crowdfunding to make a movie or to make a record, but to actually put someone in political office. And this has been proposed by Max Keiser of Russia Today, who does his show right up there behind me, overlooking beautiful Tower Bridge. And Mr. George Galloway, who is Minister of Parliament, also a former guest on London Real, who is going to be running for the Mayor of London in 2016 and crowdfunding it. And it's a very exciting time when we might be able to actually put our money where our mouth is when it comes to putting people in political office. And that's what we're here to talk about this week on London Real. We've got Max Keiser in the house, along with Mr. Simon Dixon, who is the CEO of Bank to the Future, which is a crowdfunding website that does financial crowdfunding. And he'll be teaming up with Max Keiser, who's got a new website coming out in January that will do the rewards based or the non-rewards based crowdfunding piece, as in without the financial stake in the company. So they're here to talk about that. I think it's a very exciting time for politics and for everything else when these kind of things are going on, and I think it's really going to shake the current way that people fund political parties, whether it's union-based funding or whether it's big banks or other corporations. And it's funny, if you look at the skyline behind me, we have the City of London, and this is where all the banks hang out, and this is where they fund a lot of political campaigns. So it would be very interesting to see if we can really turn the tables on the whole piece and put Mr. Boris Johnson on note. He's been famously in China this last week, taking helicopter rides around the city, when, according to Max Keiser, he should be thinking more about jobs here in the UK. So I hope you enjoy Max. It's always colorful as usual, and hopefully we'll have Mr. Galloway back on the show to talk to us more about his crowdfunding efforts. He has just raised £120,000 to film a movie called The Killing of Tony Blair, and so it's very exciting to see how these platforms are making things a reality. We are sponsored by the folks at X-Brain, as usual. I'm a big fan of their Way Better protein powder, which you can pick up with a discount for all London Reelers. If you enter the code London Real, you'll get 15% off. And for this week until the 31st, you'll get an additional 15% off with the code SALE15. So that's 30% off. Check out the Way Better protein. They got a bunch of other supplements as well. They got a colon cleanse and a multivitamin that are awesome. And they sponsor us under helicopters, and keeping this show interesting and having people on that challenge the status quo and make us ask questions like, why are we letting things happen the way they do? So shouts out to those guys. More stuff happening on London Real. We've got Mr. Kelly Starrett next week of Mobility Wad. He's going to talk about nutrition and fitness. And we're always curious if you've got other suggestions for London Real guests. I'm open ears, whether they be politicians or tech plays or anything. So just let us know. We're on Twitter and Facebook. I'm going to wrap up here soon and give you a little bit of a London skyline, but I just wanted to say thanks to the folks at Bulletproof. I am drinking their coffee, which is free of toxins and mold. I blend it up with some grass-fed butter in the morning and some brain octane oil, and it starts my day off right. I highly recommend if you want to get your brain working really well in the morning, or just feel better. So check them out. You can pick up that coffee at Xbrain if you're in Europe or the UK, or you can go to upgradedself.com in the States. Also check out bulletproofexec.com, and you can hear what Dave Asprey's been blogging about and all of their interesting things when it comes to biohacking and the rest. So that's it. I'm going to make this one short as the sun goes down. It's really beautiful being here with the London Mayor office behind me, and Tower Bridge behind that. You can see Canary Wharf, and of course my old friends in the city in those bank buildings. So we'll see if we can shake things up a bit with Bank to the Future and this whole political crowdfunding, which is an exciting time. And now I give you the one and only Mr. Max Keiser.
Let's do this, yeah? Awesome, here we go. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. We are sponsored today by the guys from Xbrain, who are the makers of Way Better Protein Powder, and Bulletproof Coffee, who Max is now a convert of the Bulletproof. Is
yeah,
that true?
Brian, I had some of this Bulletproof. I'm still drinking it, as a matter of fact. It has kind of redefined my experience in coffee drinking, Bulletproof coffee. I'm surprised that I've waited this long to experience Bulletproof coffee. I've had an experience now that I can only classify as transcendental.
And Bulletproof.
Unbelievable, Brian.
I'm telling you, Max, this was it. Dave Asprey's going to love that, and Simon soon is going to be a fan. So thanks for that shout out. Let's get on to the show, guys. My co-host today is none other than Mr. Max Keiser, who hosts the Keiser Report on RT, also known as Russia Today. You were formerly our guest here, where we talked about Bitcoins, Bernanke, and Buffett, one of my favorite shows. A lot of views.
Yeah, well, that's right. I'm here, so I'm kind of in a co-hosting capacity.
Yeah, you are a co-host
kind
today.
of running both ways here, but mostly co-hosting.
Yeah, you're co-host today. I was really worried last time you came. I didn't know if you were going to come over here to kill me. We were having a bit of a Twitter battle before. I don't know if you remember. And
Well,
so,
I always battle on Twitter. Twitter's a great place for battles. I'm a king of flame wars. I just had a massive flame war with James Woods, the actor in Hollywood.
Really?
Right? Crushed him in 2 tweets.
2 tweets?
In 2 tweets, I crushed him. And he went scurrying back to his little Hollywood Hills home, crying, hiding under his bed, and asking for mommy.
What did you say to him?
Well, he's a big Tea Partier, and
okay.
he hates the fact that Obama basically bitch slapped these Tea Party types and made them look quite foolish in this latest standoff. So I was egging him on until they had this government, until John Boehner, this political person in America, finally caved. And then it was clear that I was on the right side of this argument all along. And James Woods, who calls himself a quote-unquote patriot, had to remove himself from the battlefield.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it is, I think so.
I didn't know, like when you came over here last time, I was fully ready if I had to choke you unconscious. I didn't know if I might have to do that. But you've been boxing lately too.
Well, that
so.
would be the role of my wife, Stacy.
Okay,
She
yeah.
typically finds her, hands wrapped around my neck in fits of, violence / foreplay.
Okay. I wouldn't mess with Stacy. I don't want to get on her bad side. So let's get on with it. Our guest today is Mr. Simon Dixon, who's the CEO of Bank to the Future, which provides crowdfunding and crowd investing for entrepreneurs, businesses, and investors. You formerly worked as a stockbroker in the city. I used to work in the city too for many years. Sir Richard Branson has said that I like the goals of Bank to the Future, where everything is transparent and people can see what happens with their money. Welcome to London Real.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I am quoting him correctly, right?
Yeah, I think it's something along those lines. I think you got it.
That's a big endorsement to have Richard,
Yeah.
say good things about you guys. And I want to get into what makes you guys different. I want to talk a little bit about the whole crowdfunding space because, we run a parallel show here called Silicon Reel that's just dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene, which is right here in Shoreditch. And, we talk to entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, accelerators, incubators, that kind of thing. And we've heard all the names that are doing crowdfunding out there. And so I want to find what you're doing differently. We had a guest in here named Adam Scorgi who just raised $250,000 to make his movie The Culture High, and he used that money. He got it in a few weeks. He used that money to come over here. He actually interviewed Sir Richard Branson. He had Annie Michon, who you've had on RT, we've had here as well. And recently, Max, you spoke to British MP George Galloway on your show. He's been a guest here as well about a year ago. He's going to fund his new movie, The Killing of Tony Blair, I believe, with crowdfunding.
That's correct.
And now he's talking about perhaps crowdfunding a run for mayor.
Yeah, that's right.
Which changes the game completely.
Right. Well, but sticking on the whole Simon Dixon crowdfunding platform here, Bank to the Future in the UK, I think Simon's done an excellent job in pushing not only the technology and the concept, but also really going down there to Parliament, talking to MPs about crowdfunding, because crowdfunding in the UK is a way to jumpstart this economy in ways that both parties should really be focusing on more carefully. And one of the greatest things I've heard about crowdfunding as it relates to the UK economy, and get your take on this, Simon, is that in the UK they've got a £2 billion gambling industry, and gambling is essentially people throwing their money away in increments of £10, typical punt. But with crowdfunding, here you have a chance of, instead of throwing £10 away, putting £10 into a company, some equity, and that company could be a big success, and then start hiring people. So you're really taking a lot of that money that was really going down a sinkhole and turning it into very productive use that gives people a stake in the economy, the potential jobs. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that's one of the main reasons why I got into the crowdfunding space. To put that in context, in the UK, we've got about 4.8 million businesses at the moment. There was recently a report by Business Innovation and Skills that said that about 47% of small to medium-sized enterprises, if they could get finance, would want finance. And another report showed that about 38% of small to medium-sized enterprises that secure funding immediately go on and hire more people. Now, at the moment in the UK, we've got about 2.5 million unemployed people. If those businesses that needed funded could get funding, and they all employed one person, you'd have about 900,000 jobs. If they employed 2 people, that's 1.8 million jobs. If they employed 3 people, that's 2.7 million jobs. That's more than UK unemployment. And this was one of the original things that got me into this space. I got really excited by the concept of, if you look at the traditional retail banking system at the moment, if you take the big 5 UK banks, about 40% of the money that they lend goes to property in the UK. And that property is inflationary. It doesn't add value to the economy. It just simply, it causes a real divide.
Yeah, let's stop right there for a second, because you mentioned, first of all, let's distinguish equity crowdfunding from rewards-based crowdfunding.
Yeah.
There's 2 major players in crowdfunding in the U.S. In San Francisco, there's Indiegogo.
Right.
In New York, there's Kickstarter.
Right.
Between the 2 of them, they've raised about $1 billion for projects where people pledge money. They get nothing in return in terms of equity, but they might get a reward, a T-shirt or an invitation.
What's a typical product? Is it a movie, album?
Album? Well, I think movies are relatively new to the crowdfunding space, but it's just any kind of project out there. I think the most successful one that we've seen in the States so far is for a watch that raised something like $10 million.
That
wasn't created before they did the funding, and then they funded it, created it, and then distributed it to the people that
and it's almost like you're taking pre-orders for a product, and you get those pre-orders, and they're putting up the money, and then you can go manufacture the product. And you combine that with a technology like 3D printing, for example. And now you have your pre-orders, you're paying for the product, people want the product, they've ordered the product, now you've got a 3D printing system, and now they're printing the project. So there's a whole wave of technologies all converging with finance, manufacturing, and media, which I'm very active in. But so equity crowdfunding, however, which Bank to the Future is involved with, is different than rewards-based.
Right.
And it's
not,
really
and not
only
legal in the U.S. yet.
That's right. It's only available in the UK.
Right.
There's some laws passing in the U.S. that'll come online next year at some point. We don't know yet if it's only going to be for accredited investors, which means $1 million net worth or $200,000 of income. But here in the UK, for £10, you can own equity in a company and have a piece of that equity going forward. And this is really, I think a lot of what Simon Dixon has done here is push on this very hard and speak with the MPs. But we know we talked about this before. Crowdfunding, you could say, was almost invented here in the UK, and certainly the equity crowdfunding was invented here in the UK. So many times, technologies and companies are birthed in Europe, and then they go to the U.S., and because of the scale of the U.S., because it's such a much bigger country, they become the dominant player in these things. With equity crowdfunding, which is invented here in Britain, is that a risk?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a risk, but what we've created in the UK is, with lots of political support from MPs who come from the same vision of economic growth and trying to create jobs, they love crowdfunding. They see the potential of equity crowdfunding, which was invented in the UK. And we've been working very closely with our regulator in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, who's allowed crowdfunding to continue without actually closing it down, and also has shown lots of cooperation to create the perfect environment to allow crowdfunding to really excel in the UK.
This is going to be a competitive challenge to established banks. So I saw a piece in Forbes magazine, for example, that was kind of a slam of crowdfunding. I see there's, I'm not going to name the name, but there's a journal here in the UK that covers startups and high tech, and they tend to talk down to what they call the sharing economy. And they don't consider that to be viable. And if you look at the politics behind it, a lot of times you see the workings of a entrenched banking cartel at work. That there's a cartel here in the UK and those big five banks, and you're challenging that cartel. Not only are you talking about equity crowdfunding, Simon, but you want to crowdfund the first investment bank. You literally want to do a crowdfunded version of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, which I think, obviously anyone who watches my show would understand why I would find that very appealing. And you're saying that the regulatory framework here in the UK is such, you feel confident that you can push that through?
Yeah, well, the framework in the UK is right. We're going to, in April 2014, we're going to have the actual rules for how crowdfunding is going to continue. And so far, the FCA have given all the indications that this is going the way that we need it to go. There's some really important points here. Firstly, crowdfunding to me is not just a great way to raise finance. This is the complete democratization of investing. This is the financial inclusion where financial inclusion never existed. As you said, Max, rather than put in 10 quid, and we've got an environment where anyone can gamble 10 quid, 100 quid. But instead of gambling that 10 quid, 100 quid, you can actually end up buying some assets in a business that you like.
That's a great analogy. I mean, why not bet on a company as opposed to bet on a horse?
Yeah.
Right. And the amounts are small. It's a vice for many people. I mean, there's a whole market there, right?
Right. I mean,
it doesn't have to be disruptive in a way.
Not to say that the gambling industry here in the UK doesn't have some benefit, because they do sponsor some work, some artistic and cultural events come from the result of the UK lottery, for example, the lottery board and things like that. Right.
Not the betting companies.
They have challenged some money in this way, but the Ladbrokes of the world and these other betting companies, this is a vice, essentially, that is the cause of duress in society. But the politics here for both parties, both the Labour and for Conservative, the Tories, both parties should be jumping all over this with both feet. It's growth, it's equity, it's jobs. But we've seen in this country, in the US, enormous lobbying pressure from big banks. So either A, you guys are successful and take on the big banks, or B, big banks end up buying these crowdfunding sites out, becoming dominant, and it's reinvented in their image, et cetera. But can the politicians, for example, we have a guy on our show, a guest on our show, the artist Taxi Driver, who's been on the show.
Yeah.
He financed his film, which was interviews in his taxi. He raised £12,000 to £15,000 on another crowdfunding site here in the UK. He's got a second one listed there as well. His politics are left-wing. But he's using crowdfunding, which is a capitalist tool. But it's distributed down to the granularity of the individual activist. That's incredibly powerful. Any left-wing person in this country should love crowdfunding. So my question is, do you have the votes? Let's bring it up. Let's just move along here. You do have now another major MP who's involved in crowdfunding in the UK. Talk about it.
Yeah, and you've been to the Parliament and you've spoken with these people.
So I speak there regularly. I'm at least there every single month of meeting MP one at a time. And
what's the response?
They love it. They love crowdfunding. They love the potential of it. They're a little bit confused about what it is. It's a very new thing. And it doesn't help that there's lots of different forms of crowdfunding. So you've got, debt-based crowdfunding where people can lend money to each other rather than borrowing from a bank, where essentially the lender is the people get the interest rather than the banks get the interest.
That was invented in the UK as well.
That was invented in the UK 2005.
And then it went to the US and became big.
Yeah, and then Google got involved and got pretty big. And then you've got equity crowdfunding, which is the space that we're playing in at the moment.
Which means they own a part of the company.
You get a share in the company. Right. So essentially, here's what we've done. Firstly, you bring up a really good point. What's really exciting about crowdfunding is for the first time in history, if we make this the product that it should be and the growth rates that we're experiencing right now, it will be. If we can get the right regulatory framework for this, for the first time in history, what gets funded reflects the values of society. And it's the people that are deciding who gets funded. It's not institutions, it's not venture capitalists, it's not rich people just because they've got the capital. It's society saying,
so it's not
we
banks
vote for
deciding if they want to make a small loan.
Okay. And this is what the big change is. And it's done in a transparent environment where, the current regulatory framework in the UK was built for the financial system that was not built on transparency. So therefore you need lots of regulations in order to make up for the lack of transparency.
But this is where I might disagree with you, Max. I don't think this is on the bank's radar. And I've got a bunch of companies that have been here on Silicon Reel that have disruptive technologies, TransferWise, transferring money at small percentages of money, a company called Stripe, which makes internet payments easier. And most of them say they're not even on the radar, as in they don't even know it's going to happen. Or like you said, Max, they're just going to buy you someday. So do you really think there's resistance in the Parliament from the banks for something like Simon's company getting bigger?
Well,
at this point.
I'll give you an example why I think this could be politically a hot potato, because you have in this country an enormous grassroots activist community. Millions came out against the war. You've got demonstrations on the street all the time. I think the school teachers were protesting this week. So a lot of companies are mentioned often as really disliked by vast numbers of activists and the general public. For example, let's say a Nestle's, for example. You could crowdfund a competitor to Nestle's. You could crowdfund 15 competitors to Nestle's or Coca-Cola or some other company that people don't like. And people could own a piece of that company. And now they've got, instead of all the work that they've done over the years creating this duopoly or oligopoly in the beverage space or the milk space or water space, suddenly there are competitors and people are going to support that because they own a piece of it. So, and then the politicians, of course, they're looking for votes, and if the voters own a piece of these companies that are now competing with these other companies, they're going to listen to that, and then the lobbying efforts of those other companies are going to be diminished. Okay. So it's a genuine threat. When you say that the user is going to fund in their image or what they want to see funded, imagine if you took millions of people in this country who were against a great example, obviously, is George Galloway. His film, The Killing of Tony Blair, raised £160,000 on a crowdfunding platform. That was from people who were completely felt ripped off by the Iraq War, who were out in the streets protesting. They were not listened to. They don't have a voice in Parliament. And yet that was the biggest crowdfunded documentary film in UK history, one of the biggest crowdfunded documentaries anywhere in the world. It got zero mention in the UK press, zero mention in any outlet in the mainstream, except for my show on RT. It's been completely ignored. Now, that's what I'm saying. There's the politics of this. If you're empowering people in this way, I think is what you're getting at, is not only are you funding, let's say, companies that you want to see emerge and doing interesting things, but politically there's an edge to this. Or am I overstating that case?
Okay, well, you've got the political. I'll give you my story. I used to work in investment banking. I used to raise finance for companies that wanted to go public, and I left in 2006. had a bit of a journey in business, and then got into sustainable banking. Was really interested in what makes banking sustainable. And that involved lots of lobbying, it involved lots of conversation with MP, and it reached the point where eventually we decided, actually, business is a great vehicle, a great tool for actually getting your message out there in the world. And so we got into the crowdfunding space. And we wanted, our original vision was, it was co-founded with my wife, Bliss Dixon, and the original vision was, she got pissed off with me just banging my head against a brick wall, speaking to politicians, saying how banking should be, how investment banking should be, how retail banking should be, and just said, well, why don't we create our own bank? That was the original premise. And I thought, that's quite a hard thing to do. And we spent a lot of time changing the rules in the UK. And we've managed to get, the FCA, the Bank of England, the Treasury, all to change the rules on what's actually possible in the UK, because the political appetite to increase competition in banking is very large.
Well, let me ask you another part of this equation is that you mentioned it a moment ago. The enormous subsidies that come from the government that go toward housing and property. Mm-hmm. I forget the number you just quoted, 40%.
40% of a bank's loan book goes to property, okay. 40% to financial speculation, and only about 13% to small to medium-sized enterprise.
See, that to me is an amazing number, and we know why that is, because George Osborne's Help to Buy scheme. They are opening taps to the Bank of England. They're offering people a chance to buy homes for 5% down, and they're re-pumping up the bubble that crashed 5 years ago as a way to buy votes for the next election, knowing full well that that's going to crash again, and there's going to be another huge dislocation in the economy, and it's a huge problem.
Are you completely against that, by the way?
Well, I'm saying that here you have an opportunity. Only 13% of the economy goes to small and medium enterprises. Crowdfunding can compete for those dollars that are going to go into housing speculation and housing bubbles, and into companies that are going to improves Britain's manufacturing, their export, and jobs, and wean themselves off. Property speculation in Britain is like oil to the OPEC.
Especially London.
Or like cheese in France. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how they define themselves, as property speculation. It's a curse of property speculation.
And it's hurting the small businesses, you're saying, because all the loan money is going.
It's hurting the whole economy. There's nothing sustainable about propping up an economy based upon inflating property prices.
It doesn't create jobs. It just creates asset values, which are then usually used as collateral to buy assets in other countries.
And this actually ties in with your original question, which is, do the banks care about us? Well, actually, I think the banks, the retail banks anyway, there's only two types of bank lending to small to medium-sized enterprise right now. It's one, the government forcing them, and second, good PR. That's all they're doing in bank lending. Now, I think they're actually seeing this as quite a refreshing break for them, that if we could serve the small to medium-sized enterprise sector, they can get back to the unsustainable stuff of pushing up property prices and serving financial speculation.
Okay, what's your biggest obstacle right now? I mean, this isn't a big business yet. I mean, you guys have raised £650,000 on your site.
We passed the 700 grand mark today.
Right. We had Cedars in, we had others in, and we're expecting this like big push to happen. What's like your biggest obstacle? Is it PR? Is it Parliament?
The biggest obstacle right now is that crowdfunding is still a niche. It's still not that known. I mean, it's starting to change. People are talking about it. It's misunderstood. But yeah, we've got a big job to educate businesses and let them know that there are alternatives to raising finance, and there's much better ways of raising finance than going to your bank who's not interested in lending to you anyway.
Well, we need a success story, probably. We need like a big...
Yeah, it mirrors many times in the technology business. You have that period of adaptation, adoption that goes on, chugs along for 2 or 3 years, and then the famous hockey stick move,
right,
where suddenly it just becomes ubiquitous.
Right.
And I think that's where crowdfunding
and
is.
If there was a big exit from a crowdfund, then it would be big. If we had the $1 billion company that some guy spent £10 on and became the Facebook millionaires, then people would maybe take notice.
Yeah, equity crowdfunding is nascentier. It's even further behind, let's say, rewards-based crowdfunding, because rewards-based crowdfunding has had the big successes. They've financed big things, and it's clearly well known, and there's a lot of different competition is heating up. But the equity side is really, I think, has a chance to do a lot of things besides just giving people another way to spend £10 or £100 or £1,000, but to change fundamentally some of the political dynamism. I wanted to just touch basically on something that as another case study of crowdfunding, and I had it with my own site, Pirate My Film, which is very small.
You've been involved in crowdfunding for a while, is that right?
Yeah, I've been involved in crowdfunding and virtual currencies really for 15 years.
I mean, like, we were talking recently, Max. I mean, fintech is a very sexy word to throw around, and it comes up a lot on Silicon Reel, and London is considered to have the best odds when it comes to fintech. But you've been a fintech guy for 20 years, right?
I call it fintech media.
Fintech media, okay.
Because I see fintech and media as merging.
Okay.
And so, like, for example, on Pirate My Film, which was, I have like a little hobby crowdfunding site, I was able to crowdfund investigative journalism that ended up on my show. And then we also use Bitcoin in that case, 100% Bitcoin use.
Right.
So in that way, it's another use for crowdfunding. And when you see that Glenn Greenwald, for example, just got a huge $250 million chunk of cash from the founder of eBay to do journalism. I think going forward, using crowdfunding and alternative currencies are going to be a way to fund reports in the field anonymously and get a lot of things reported that we haven't seen yet. So a lot of these so it's media, that's the media component. So media can be disrupted as well. Banks can be disrupted, media can be disrupted, currencies are being disrupted. All these things, it's almost like a Cambrian period in technology where you suddenly have this sudden explosion in growth and varieties in ways that my biggest challenge is to convince the average person that this is good, because the average person right now thinks all banking sucks. I mean, for me, I make my bones by saying how bad bankers are.
Yeah.
I'm saying that this is a revolution in the banking space that Simon Dixon and Bank to the Future is part of, that you're cherry picking the best bits, leaving the worst. And the problem with banking and finance and capitalism and economics, as I've been talking about for years, is distribution. You know, the benefits are not being distributed. They're being hoarded by the inner circle using derivatives and other financial tricks. If you can put the benefits and get them distributed evenly throughout the economy, then people are going to be happy with that.
What role does Bitcoin play in this? I mean, I know you've been a Bitcoin fan for a long time. Now, equity crowdfunding with Bitcoin makes it even trickier.
At the moment, Bitcoin is not really on the scene. I use it on my little site,
right.
But when you try to, Bitcoin is even further back the regulatory agenda than crowdfunding is.
Right.
So I think the Bitcoin story with Barry Silbert in New York launching his BIT fund, Bitcoin Investment Trust, and it's really coming on. I think that it's going to fit beautifully with crowdfunding because the cost of transactions are so low. BitPay, which is out of Atlanta, another huge startup hub, is signing up customers. They have over 10,000, 12,000 customers. They did a secondary seed round at a nice valuation. I'm sure it's tripled by then in just 6 months. So that's, I think, going to plug into this as well.
Okay.
But
plug in later. I'm sure you don't mention Bitcoin when you go to Parliament because you don't need two things to try to.
No, I mean, it's hard enough to know about crowdfunding and what it is and educating them on the difference. You want to take it to Bitcoin, we'll leave that for a later
Let me ask
conversation.
you this. You were in Parliament recently. You talked to George Galloway. He was successful in the killing of Tony Blair project. You had a meeting one-on-one. He wants to run for mayor, raise £1 million. That's the preliminary talk.
That's exciting.
To run for mayor of London. We do our show right across the street from the mayor's office. Okay, what did he say? To give us your take, what happened at that meeting?
Well, it's really exciting now as well when you take it to the political level with crowdfunding. So put the equity stuff aside. What happens when politics is crowdfunded? When it's not large institutions putting, giving money through, contributing money to the political campaign with ties of what their agenda is. One's when it's people contributing 10 quid, 100 quid. Essentially, that's what was meant to have happened with Obama. With his original, essentially he was the first form of crowdfunded politics, and then, it got into the institutional space and the corporate space, and everything changes there.
It's funny, he didn't follow up in the next election at all, did he?
No.
Because it was small donations for that first election, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then he turned his back on that whole concept.
Well, then he had Wall Street money and things like that.
Then he turned his back.
But the fascinating thing about crowdfunding is when someone goes and makes that investment, they almost make an investment in your product. So I'm guessing that for everybody that pledges £1 to Galloway, that person shows up in the poll and votes. It's almost like they're more invested than just buying something.
It's taking the marketing process, the political process, the voting process, and sticking it all into one thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, in the case of Galloway's run, if it's on Bank to the Future, it wouldn't take advantage of the equity side of a crowdfunded product because he's not offering equity in his fund. You do, however, have the ability to raise on a rewards-based product, or to do a fund. You could raise money for Galloway.
Well, yeah. I mean, let me get this clear. So we Bank to the Future is all about getting more money to the productive side of the economy, to SMEs, to businesses that want to sell shares in their companies, to investors, and the mission is. And anybody can be an investor, and that's what we're fighting for. Because at the moment, the regulatory framework is not 100% set up to keep the crowd in crowdfunding. There's certain rules at the moment that we're making sure that they're not there in April to keep the crowd in crowdfunding.
But you offer many options. You offer debt. You offer equity. I mean, could you potentially fund George Galloway's run for mayor?
It would be an interesting thing to do. What I'm interested in is the potential of funding lots of these different types of crowdfunding through Bank to the Future. So, in our space, we're investors are looking for a return on investment, or they're looking to fund things and join the journey of the entrepreneur.
I think I have a little insight into this, in that there's two distinct business models. There's the equity side and the reward side.
Yeah.
So your niche is really on the equity side.
Yeah, that's where we want to play in the equity side,
and some maybe lending at some point.
Yeah, well,
okay.
and
but
then
on the reward side, you're not really as active on that side, and as a business, you want to stay focused.
Yeah.
So in the case of Galloway, you could conceivably do it on your platform.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not necessarily, it wouldn't fall under the rubric of their niche of doing equity. They could, because they've got the technology, and he could do it.
Are there any legal issues to keep Galloway from doing this?
And, well, if it's just a matter of raising money for a campaign, then it's like people, like you said, Obama, you're just getting donations.
Right. Okay.
But to Simon's point, if you're going to put up £10 to fund the campaign, then it's probably likely you're going to vote in that way.
Yeah.
Like I spoke to our lawyer about this a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, like, well, they're just going to use the money to in ways that are somehow improper. But as I pointed out, the way the crowdfunding works in this case is that if you don't hit the target, in this case £1 million, then no money is collected at all. It's all or nothing. So it's not about, we want to raise $1 million. We only raised 50,000, and I'm going to go and use that to buy a new, living room set.
Right.
No, it's about, here's the target. I get to $1 million. Because $1 million, raised $1 million, X number of thousands of people want this. They want me as mayor. This is the target. And either it's yes or no. It's a binary outcome. Either it's they raised it and they want him for mayor, or they don't. So it's not just about, it's a campaign. I'm just trying to raise a few money. It's a serious attempt, again, to disrupt this political process, which everyone agrees is completely corrupted by big business, big corporations. I mean, we do our show
unions as well, right?
Over by the mayor's office. And there's the mayor's office, and then there's the mayor's public relations office. And it's a parade all day long of big business, coming through that office, looking to do deals. And then Boris Johnson's over in China in a helicopter and saying Chinese people come to London. Well, what about all the jobs that ended up going to China and disenfranchised all the people in the UK that are now struggling on benefits? Didn't you put the cart before the horse here? What about taking care of your own first, Boris? And then go to China, But that's a very Wall Street mentality that he's demonstrating. Just any problems, just sell more bonds. Just sell more paper. Create more, just paper it all over. That's a very Wall Street attitude he's got. He's not a representative of the constituents that he's supposed to be representing by going off to China to get a lot of paper to cover over the catastrophe that has been the policies of this and the former government. But here you have an opportunity to use technology in a disruptive way and to put a George Galloway out there. If they don't like it, if the Tories don't like it, or the Labor backbenchers don't like it, then you can crowdfund your own candidate. Right. Let's see what the people want, not what the people are going to be sold through the corruption of the BBC, some half-baked policies that are been, like, I must just make a quick digression. Stephanie Flanders, the BBC's business editor, just moved to become an associate at JP Morgan. Okay? So is this why BBC didn't report on JP Morgan's Forex scandal? Is this why they didn't report on the London whale scandal? On the any number of the half dozen scandals of J.P. Morgan in London. Is that why Stephanie Flanders, the BBC's editor, didn't report on it? Because she's trying to get a job at the at J.P. Morgan?
And future reporters will see how they're rewarded by doing this.
Right. So now they're like, oh, we better be toe the line
Right.
because we're going to get a big job. That's unconscionable. The BBC should have gone down in front of BBC House, taken out a Luger and blown their head off. And that would have given some closure to the BBC for the British people, finally, because they're worse than worthless. They're dangerous. They're dangerous ideologues. Anyway, Simon, Simon Dixon of Bank to the Future.
I'm curious, if say the three candidates, say it was Galloway, someone from the left, someone from the right, all did a crowdfunding, I bet you could predict the election with 80% certainty on who hit the £1 million target first. I mean, like you said, put your money where your mouth is. If you don't like what he's doing, you raise £1 million.
Put your money where your values are.
Okay.
And that's what's great about crowdfunding.
Right, and people vote with their money.
But that's democracy, isn't it?
And that's what crowdfunding essentially is. There's different forms of finance, but essentially crowdfunding, if you look at the internet, what is the internet? It's a form of ideologies. There's lots of ideologies. If you look at a LinkedIn group, it's a series of people that have got together and said, we like to talk about this. And it's a series of people in Facebook pages saying, we like to talk about this, and it's shared ideologies. Now, if you're running a good following online and it's your ideological people, that your peers that are going to be funding you. So for the first time in history, it's not the bank saying, yes, we're going to give you the loan. It's not the venture capitalist saying, yes, we're going to give you the money. It's the people saying that we want this thing to happen.
Right.
And you can be yourself. You don't have to dress up in a suit and go to a bank or anything. It's you being yourself, running your own brand, and people are funding each other based upon shared ideologies.
Yeah, it's an efficient market, which is what should be happening in banking, but it's not. So what does Galloway do? Does he have to go to another site? Max, are you going to toss your hat in the ring? What's going on?
With Mr. Galloway?
Or with anything, with any of this space?
Well, Mr. Galloway, Mr. George Galloway, he was on my show, Keiser Report, during the campaign for his film, The Killing of Tony Blair. Right. And the original target was £50,000. They ended up raising £160,000. And a lot of the comments in those sections were like, Keiser Report, Keiser Report, Keiser Report.
Because you were the only one covering this, right?
We were the only one covering it, and we've got this huge global audience. And George Galloway gets treated poorly by the UK press because they have their agenda. But he's beloved around the world, especially in the United States, where he was testifying in Congress and really made them look like the monkeys that they are.
Right. It's fascinating that people around the world could bid to support him to be mayor of London.
Yeah, but if it truly is a globalized world and it's a globalized economy, then we need globalized representatives like George Galloway who speaks to the globe.
And, Boris is in China, so
he's over in China.
He's raising money in China.
In other words, my show was able to, and I call it financial technology media, fintech media. And I've always been involved going back to the Hollywood Stock Exchange that you mentioned back in the 90s. I had patents on these different technologies. But the idea is you can, all three of these are fungible. Finance, technology, and media. They're all fungible. They're all equal in some ways. They're all very plastic, and they can all be shaped in whatever creative ways you want to. What people have difficulty understanding is how you can treat finance as a completely fungible commodity that can be molded like plastic into anything you want. The creativity in finance is enormous in terms of coming up with the financial products. But all that creativity has gone to the few bankers in the clique, whether they come out with a credit default swap, collateralized debt obligation, mortgage-backed securities, various arbitrage carry trades. All these things. You were in banking.
I saw all of that.
All this amazing creativity.
Yeah. And it's the rocket scientists.
The mathematics, but all in the service of rent-seeking. All in the service of gaming the system, rent-seeking, and extracting wealth. High-frequency trading, algorithmic trading. Yeah. That's just extracting wealth from the system to go into a few pockets. That creativity is incredible creativity, but it should be distributed throughout the economy so that every mom and pop out there has a slice of this financial technology media emerging growth that's happening, but they don't. And where Bank to the Future and crowdfunding and equity funding potentially does. Now with Galloway, I think that this is, we're going to support him definitely on this bid I'm in talks right now with coming out with a crowdfunding site myself in January.
Okay. Give us any details?
Well, I've been keeping it under wraps because I want it to be kind of an anniversary gift to my wife, Stacy.
So Stacy doesn't know about this.
It's a big secret to Stacy.
Wow.
But I'm keeping it under wraps.
The first time she'll hear about it.
This could be the first time she's hearing about it. It's going to be an anniversary gift.
Wow.
Right now, she's probably like what? But
Congratulations, Stacy.
It's coming out in January, and
Okay.
of course in February we celebrate our first year. We celebrate our 11th year together in our as a couple. We met on February 13th of 11 years ago. So anyway, that site is called Start Join.
Okay.
Startjoin.com. You can pre-register there. But it's a crowdfunding site here in the UK, which unlike Simon's, it's going to be rewards based.
Okay.
So we're in the same space, but we have different models. So in a George Galloway, potentially, we could combine like a syndicate, and like he can raise money on both platforms, just like Goldman and JP Morgan would raise money for Twitter or underwrite the Twitter offering. We could underwrite the Galloway offering on both Bank to the Future and Start Join, which I think we will do, and he can come on my show. And I think it's a great story.
And here's the exciting thing as well. Companies like StartJoin can crowdfund their startup capital and give equity to the people that have supported Max all over the years, and they become the shareholders.
That's right. StartJoin, my crowdfunding site, can seek capital raise on Bank to the Future. Because I don't do equity, but he does.
Again, like you said, using financial instruments is molding the plastic. You're saying he's kind of like your crowdfunding internet banking arm, and then you are the rewards arm, potentially.
Yeah, business finance and technology and securities are not as difficult as people make them out to be. The whole field of economics is fairly simple. And once people can kind of understand the basic concepts, they can appreciate why this is a good idea. What happens is that people are bamboozled because those who control it at the top are constantly coming up with new terminology and new descriptions and new ways to bamboozle people. The great example currently would be quantitative easing, which is a term which is meant to obfuscate. It's called monetizing debt, which if you look that up on a financial dictionary,
Monetizing debt, all right.
will be you'll say when countries are desperate, they monetize their debt. But they can't say we're not monetizing our debt.
Is that printing money, basically? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're buying back the debt that they issue and buy back the debt at the same time.
Right.
So UK government is a huge buyer of its own debt. The American government is a huge buyer of its own debt. They're monetizing their own debt. They call quantitative easing, but it's monetizing their own debt. And so you see this all the time where they try to introduce phrases and terminology to confuse the issue. But it's all very simple when you get down to it. You want companies that make more than they spend. You want companies that hire employees. You want money that has value, some kind of intrinsic value, not just a mathematical algorithm.
Just money making money for the sake of making money.
Yeah, or gaming the system. The whole central banking system is based on a charade or a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme in many ways. So that's why, although I'm highly critical of the system, and on my show I'm very critical of it, it's not because I think capitalism sucks. I think it's because we need to get back to some basic form of a distributed model of distributing both risk and reward.
Okay, and this is what you're going to do. And just quickly to finish up with you, how is StartJoin different than the other ones?
Well, as you say on the pre-registration page, it says StartJoin crowdfunding with a twist. And that twist will be revealed in January.
On the anniversary.
I can't get into the details,
okay.
But people can pre-register.
Okay.
But it will be up and running in time to support Galloway in his run for mayor of London, and I think £1 million is a good target.
That's exciting. That's a very exciting announcement. Yeah. Simon, if someone does want to get involved in Bank to the Future, like how simple is it? And what can they do? Should they just sign up and take £10 and just do it to get involved in the process? Or like when you meet someone on the street and you tell them what you do, what's the next step?
Well, there's two different types of people we're marketing to effectively. We're trying to get the British public to understand that you don't have to be rich to be an investor anymore. And that essentially we're all dragons, we're all angel investors, and we can all decide and we all need to participate if we want this to happen in a big way. So we're always saying, the investor, they can simply go onto our site, they can play a video, They can look at the pitch. If they're interested in buying shares in the company, we need to put them through a bit of compliance to make sure they understand the risks involved in investing. They understand what the product is, how they, how they make their money, and what the risk of it is. And then they can download the business plan. They can look at the financial model. They can ask questions of the entrepreneur. And here's the thing: when you put a business under the scrutiny of hundreds of potential investors, there's always one person that asks the question that the other people didn't know to ask. So essentially it's crowd diligence. And many people say, well, don't you need a venture capitalist and a sophisticated investor to do that? Well, of those hundreds of thousands of people that are going to see this pitch, you're going to have someone that has insight that venture capitalist might not have. And you rely on each other in order to do the diligence. And if the entrepreneur has been creative in terms of lying about something in the business plan, that's going to come up. Their reputation's going to be down. So it's when you put a lot of traffic to it, it's keeping things honest. Now, secondly, if you're a business seeking funding, then the process that we go through is we've tried to replicate the same process that was used in an investment bank to do a public offering. So there used to be there still is a very well-defined process to raise billions for large companies. And that is, you come to an investment banker like me in the day, used to pay me $250,000 up front, and then we used to take a 5% equity, 5% of whatever they raise, and then 5% carry-on fee. And we'd spend 9 months getting them what we call IPO ready to go public.
All right, so you streamline this process, basically.
So now what we've done is we've taken all of those processes, stripped out all of the costs, made it accessible to people that want to invest online, and over a 4-week period, get them investment ready, so that they put their best pitch on the platform, do the due diligence that's required to make sure there's nothing fraudulent. And then the key difference with a venture capitalist and with an angel investor is they're filtering for what they think is a good idea. We're not filtering for what we think is a good idea. The crowd are deciding by whether they put their cash in
So
or not.
efficient markets, the market decides that kind of thing.
We bring up an interesting idea, which is, I guess it's analogous to open source software. Open source software, with Linux, which came around, and you had people contributing code in an open way, and it created a product that was a Microsoft Slayer, essentially, with the Linux platform. So similarly, that's interesting. You're saying so the due diligence is open source due diligence.
Yeah, so you have open source due diligence. Now we do some stuff up front. Where we think our responsibility comes in is firstly making sure they are who they say they are and doing a fraud check. And secondly, making sure that they are what we call investment ready. And investment ready means that they've got their best, clearest, not misleading pitch on video. They've got the business plan that covers the key points that people need to know before investing. They've got a financial model that at least makes sense to them and makes sense, and then the crowd determine whether it does make sense. But our duty is to make sure that they're presenting all the information. And if they get through that process, then they can pitch on the site. But what we want to do is we want to make sure they've got their best pitch online, so that the business doesn't look. Some platforms you see someone rocking out an iPhone and pitching the business. It's actually a really good business, but it comes across crap.
When I was a broker on Wall Street in the 1980s,
Payne Weber.
Payne Weber.
Yeah. I was a banker's trust, but 90s for me.
Yeah, when we were doing the IPOs, they circulated the red herring.
Yeah.
Which is the preliminary prospectus. And in the preliminary prospectus, which is the estimates and the use of funds, risks, at that time, it was against the rules to have even color photos.
Okay.
Because it was considered an inducement to buy. This is before CNBC, before this idea of, the Facebook IPO was preceded by a big budget Hollywood film about the founder. Whereas 25 years ago, that would be illegal. That would be considered an enormous inducement to buy the stock. And of course, that stock went public and immediately crashed because it was priced in a horrific way for the reasons that those laws used to be in place. There used to be safeguards. So
And they still have the quiet periods and stuff in the States. And Facebook stock is back a little bit.
No, Facebook stock's a new all-time high. I mean, it's done well, but that whole process of going public at 38 and then watching it drop to 17 was mishandled. Obviously, a mishandling of an IPO, and I think a lot of it had to do with the hype. You had the president of the United States meeting with the founder and having a photo op and the movie coming out, and then having CNBC, which is a tip sheet or a hype sheet. James Cramer and these people are just, like they're down at the racetrack, trying to pump people up to bet on horses. And then they build this enormous moment that's 20, 30 years ago that would have been completely illegal. But that's where media now has become transformed in the financial space, and the finances have changed, and the technology has changed, and it's all changing. But I think this is a responsible way, more than the open source model, where we're going to open source due diligence, we're going to open source the funding, we're going to put the crowd in crowdfunding, make it 10 pounds a shot, and we're going to put people put their mouth where their values are, and it's both economic, financial, and politically, it could have a profound impact on the environment going forward.
Yeah. Max, you're in media. I mean, we see you 3 times a week on Russia Today. You're in, 800 million homes worldwide. How do you see technology interrupting the media? I mean, what are we going to see different out there when it comes to media? I mean, you say fintech media.
Yeah.
What's going to be different? I mean, you talked about people like crowdfunding, someone reporting from Syria or something like that. But what are we going to see, do you think?
Well, I think television is still a dominant media platform.
Surprisingly, right?
5 years ago, 10 years ago, people said television would be dead. Yeah. But people watch TV on their smartphones. So, TV as a medium is still a viable medium. It's still...
And will be for another 5 or 10 years.
It still has a lot of life in TV. Okay. The economics of TV have changed. So the be able to produce a show like this are obviously 1/1000th of the cost of doing something similar even 10 years ago because of these cameras.
And the distribution system.
The distribution system, the willingness of advertisers. 15 years ago when I started in technology in Los Angeles, people were curious whether advertisers would ever come to the internet. A lot of people in Hollywood at that time did not have email addresses because it thought that marked them as too geeky. To be like, what's your email address? And be like, I don't have one of those.
And geeky wasn't cool back then.
Right, that's a fad. Internet's it won't last. Then the Blair Witch Project came out. And it completely transformed Hollywood's attitude toward the internet because that became a $120, $130 million global huge success with a campaign that was purely on the internet. Yeah. Then suddenly bells went off. People said, oh, I get it now. And then that launched the internet as we know it, and that with the IPO of Netscape back in '94.
Okay.
But so going forward, TV is still going to be big.
Yeah.
And I think that once you allow for people to have stakes in equity in these companies, they're going to change what they look at. They're not going to be necessarily looking at what James Cramer wants them to look at CNBC, but they're going to be looking at how things are doing that they themselves are participating in. And not through a fund, not through a mutual fund, not through indirect, not through a pension fund, but as direct equity shareholders in something that gives them a pure equity stake. So if this company does well, then they're going to benefit, and they're going to be very closely following that. And I think there's going to be a change in the way people think about it, which is very healthy. And the potential is high. The other technology, obviously, is 3D printing, which is going to be enormously interesting. And then with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is shocking everyone. When I did your show here, just a few months ago, it was people, we were, the other guest was very, ambivalent about Bitcoin.
He was against Bitcoin.
He was against Bitcoin, essentially. And the most I could do was trying to bring him around to being ambivalent about it. Like, well, I think you're being overly negative. But, now here we are 6 months later, and you see with the government shutdown in America, with the Cyprus bailout, with another bailout in Greece, people are gravitating toward Bitcoin. The market capitalization is higher. They confiscated the founder's Bitcoin from Silk Road.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did the closing of the Silk Road help the Bitcoin or hurt the Bitcoin?
It totally helped it because, number one...
temporarily drop in the price.
Well, the price dropped temporarily. Now it's at a new high.
Right.
But the stigma of having Silk Road is now gone.
Right, so you don't have to worry
about... The punching bag of Silk Road is gone.
Right.
But here's the key. Here's the greatest thing about that. The FBI went to collect $90 million of the Bitcoins from the founder, and they can't crack the cryptology. So for anyone out there who says, well, the government could always crack the cryptology, the answer is no, they can't. They never will be able to. The Bitcoin protocol is uncrackable. It is sound. Bitcoin is money like gold and silver is money. The intrinsic value is in that protocol, is in the mathematical genius of the protocol and the distributed network of miners who are creating additional Bitcoins every 10 minutes. There is intrinsic value. And that's a huge technological leap forward for currency, for technology, and for something like crowdfunding. I'm going to be working tirelessly to bring Bitcoin. I've talked to BitPay, which is Tony Gallippi's company out of Atlanta. We're very close to integrate BitPay solutions across the board in everything we're doing here. And as the regulatory landscape changes and recognizes this potential, we're going to be right there with it.
But there's ways working around the existing regs, at the moment. So, one of the things Max and myself have talked about is what about, crowdfunding a fund that invests in Bitcoin-related businesses.
Right,
And
so it's once removed, so they can crowdfund a fund with you, and then that fund can go spend their money on Bitcoins.
And this is the real potential of this
That's
thing. Is
interesting.
that there's lots of different versions.
Yeah, we
of
have
what
a
you can
fund
do with
teed
this
up, which would be a Bitcoin fund on your Bank to the Future. But we have to go through down some more regulatory hoops to get some paperwork in order. But essentially, people would have the ability to invest in, like I have my own private equity fund, Heisenberg Capital. And
That's a great name, Max.
Thank you.
And did you come up with that name before Breaking Bad or
No one will
after?
believe that I thought of it before Breaking Bad, but it's been around since before Breaking. I've always talked about, with virtual currencies, I've always talked about in terms of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle when I've talked about virtual currency. So it's natural for me to call it that. But I am well connected. What about having a fund on Bank to the Future, put up £10, now you're invested in Bitcoin and Bitcoin-related startups. If it's going to be the internet, another huge burst of activity, then you're going to see enormous return.
And this is the hugely exciting potential of where we're at right now. We're right at the beginning of every single financial product being transformed into a crowd-based product, with the key difference being transparency. And so, I believe that we're very soon, our children are going to ask us, Dad, what was it like when financial institutions were control where money went? What was it like when people didn't invest online? That must have been a really strange world to live in.
Right.
I want to just look at the Financial Times today. There's a huge story about these bankers in the UK caught rigging Forex. And the headline is that the regulatory authority here is going to allow them to remain anonymous.
Okay.
So, versus what Simon just said. So here you have you caught the guys red-handed. It's a criminal indictment for rigging markets, 20 or more of them.
Another market that's been rigged.
Another example.
After LIBOR.
Criminal, not civil this time. Criminal investigation, jail time. And here in the UK, the institutions are set up in such a way as that they're debating whether or not we're going to release their names. Which gives you an idea of the cloak and dagger nature of this industry, where someone like Bank to the Future can come in and bring in transparency, which immediately gives an enormous competitive edge. I think in this country, people have just gotten used to the fact that they live in a kleptocracy, that the bankers are stealing their money 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they've just taken it on board as the normal way life is. They've got a slave mentality in this country.
Now, you're every day on Russia Today, you're talking about the banks. You bash the banks. You're always trying to keep them, responsible for what they're doing, whether it be, LIBOR, FX, you name it. Besides Bank to the Future, which is a technology you see being good, what else is London going to provide? Is it going to be Bitcoin payments everywhere? What other kind of startups do you think, or technology edges is London going to make? There's this company TransferWise we spoke to. Is this going to start being everywhere? And will these be crowdfunded, these companies?
I just saw an interesting documentary by the guy who does all these cooking shows, travels around the world.
Anthony Bourdain.
Bourdain.
He's a cool guy.
Now he's on CNN. He's got a new show.
Really?
And he went to Denmark, and he met the owner of Noma, I think the name of the restaurant is.
Yeah,
Noma,
very famous.
Very famous restaurant. The culture there is it's a socialist country, and you're not allowed to hold your head up much or you get knocked down. This is the culture.
France as well.
Yeah, but
this
sounded really very, very, very socialist in this sense. They have Christiania, also this little enclave of hippies, and
I've been in there.
It's a complete free living. Okay, with Noma, he went against that ethos. And he did something that some would call American, in that he said, look, I'm going to create the best restaurant in the world. And he did. It's considered 3 years in a row the best restaurant in the world, and it's enormously successful. But the comment that Bourdain made, which I picked up on, which is very interesting, he said the entire country now has more confidence. There's a huge generation of chefs that are feeling more confident. and they're pioneering in the restaurant space, and there are lots more successes. Here in the UK, there's a similar attitude, that socialist attitude, of don't speak up too much. Stay in line, be a brick in the wall. With the success, I mean, obviously Richard Branson was a huge success, but his day is 20 years ago. I mean, he's not really the fresh guy, is he? But for a technology guy to come along with technology, maybe it's Simon Dixon, maybe somebody else, and you get that billion-dollar startup in Silicon Roundabout.
Yeah.
It will fundamentally change how this generation of entrepreneurs think about this space, and you will get that renewed confidence. And just like flicking a switch, it changes from saying, I don't think I can make it, to I can definitely make it.
Right, and we get that PayPal effect where you got the guys that have that successful exit, then go on to spend 10 million, 20 million on the next startup and the next startup, and we just haven't seen that happen here yet.
And one of the fundamental things in making that happen is, so I've got a lot of experience of been involved. I raised angel finance for my last business. We crowdfunded this business. I was involved in the IPO market, helping venture capitalists exit. So I've been in the different products and range of raising finance. But one of the key things is the difference in psychology of the investor from the American investor to the British investor. And if you look at, so I'll give you an example. When we were pitching for finance, I was pitching to an American investor, and they were saying, how come the valuation is so low? Why can't you push that up a bit? The British investor was, why is that valuation so high? Why they were trying to push the valuation down. And the American investor was saying, here's what I'm going to do in order to push the valuation up, in order to add value to the company and make it more valuable. The British investor was saying, what are you going to do if I give you my money in order to make sure that this valuation
It's like that character Del Boy in the show.
My favorite,
Something Horses and Coaches.
Only Fools and Horses.
Only Fools and Horses. That's the British mentality, is the Del Boy mentality. Like, how do I get another 5p out of this? How do I squeeze that a little bit more? What's my value for money? Or another example is like somebody was saying that I was saying, I'm hanging out in Silicon Roundabout a lot, and I'm looking at all these startups, talking to people. And they're like, it'll never work up there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why is that? The rents are too high. I'm like, no, idiot. The reason the rents are high is because it's working.
Yeah.
You understand? when it's working, things go up. But that's a foreign idea to a British entrepreneur. Not this new generation,
right?
But the current entrepreneurial class. That somehow is a failure. That somehow the prices are going up in ways that I'm paying more for rent. Like, you want to pay more for rent. You want to pay 10 times what you're paying in rent. You want to buy the building. You want to buy the block. That's the mentality.
It's this whole mentality we talk about on Silicon Valley all the time. And from a failure perspective as well, failure in this country is considered the end of your career. And in America, especially in the startup scene, it's
the start of your career.
It's a badge of honor. And so, I think there's a whole mentality difference whether it comes to pitching the $1 million company or pitching the $1 billion company.
Or how about this? Here's two shows. I have to jump in here. I'm sorry. But there's two shows on right now, Downton Abbey and Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah.
They both take place in the 1920s.
Yeah. Do you watch both of them?
I watch both of them.
Okay.
Downton Abbey, English Empire is finished. And they're dealing with the fact that they've lost their empire, and everything is about loss.
It's about controlling the size of the loss, isn't it?
How do we control the size of the loss?
Right.
Whereas then they look at Boardwalk Empire. Steve Buscemi, it's post-war America, World War I, and it's about how do we get more business? I want more business. I want Chicago. I want New York. I want LA.
Florida.
I want Florida, right? So that's right there in the 20s. You see the torch being passed. The British pound was the world reserve currency before the World War I. It was passed to America after World War I. And now we're in a period now where it's probably being passed again from America, just going somewhere else. But right there in that period, you see in these two shows a very interesting dynamic. Whereas Silicon Roundabout now is all about Downton Abbey, where it should be more like Boardwalk Empire.
That's a good analogy. Are you going to sit here while we bash your country, Simon, or are you going to stand up for the British?
No, we're American.
No, actually, I agree. Firstly, we're in a shifting time. I think what we're seeing in the Silicon Roundabout is really, really exciting. But one of the things that needs to change is definitely the investor mindset. So, one of the things that makes Silicon Valley is that, firstly, when an entrepreneur goes and pitches a venture capitalist and says, I want to create a £1 billion company, they don't laugh you out of the room. In the UK, you want to create a billion-pound company. You know,
Which Wonga might actually be a billion
Wonga
pound
might
company.
be that.
Well,
but they don't believe it until they've seen all the evidence and they've got the great management team and everything's in place and they're on massive traction, and then the venture capitalists will come and put some capital to charge it up a bit.
Okay, so that mentality is shifting
yeah.
now. We are seeing it slowly shifting, and it will change as the whole market becomes global, I think.
Well, that's one of the things as well. Is Silicon Valley when you get your funding, they also put you in touch with they've got all the team there, they've got the lawyers there, they've got the developers there. They put the whole team together to make the business work. Now, the key difference in the UK is that if you can replicate that environment, which is where I think crowdfunding goes a long way, because if you have 100, 200, 1,000 investors, within that crowd, there's going to be all sorts of different skill sets that create a team and take something that could have been an idea that would have got laughed out of the room in the venture capitalist space and actually put the team around it of self-interested people who all have equity, in there, and they're not necessarily just the rich people. They're the people that actually want to, that might want to get their hands.
Well, look,
happens.
Wonga though is a good example of a lot of things that are wrong.
Okay.
Because here's Wonga that charges rates of 5,000%. For payday loans, as they're called.
Have you bashed Wonga on your show yet, or talked about Wonga?
I believe I have. Yeah,
Okay.
I think I've done it a few times.
All right.
And they are. There was a story in the Financial Times a couple of weeks ago saying that somebody they were trying to break up a ring of extortionary mafia here in the UK for charging 2,500% annualized rates of return. I was like, Wonga charges 5,000%, and they give a lot of money to the Tories. They give a lot of money to the Conservative government, who then makes it very easy for Wonga to continue to act as predatory lenders in the society in a way that's enormously damaging. Wonga is one of the most damaging companies in this country. And the same token, you've got a P2P lending company, which in this country I think is Zopa.
There's Zopa for personal loans and.
Okay, Zopa is a personal loan where I can borrow money at 5% using not crowdfunding, but essentially P2P.
Right, peer-to-peer, yeah.
Peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
I'm going to borrow money at 5% or 6% or 7%, not 5,000%. As an investor, I'm getting screwed by George Osborne and Mark Carney because they're only giving me 1% on my savings or 0.5% of my savings. As a saver, I'm going to get 5%. So here's a solution: P2P lending. That is great for savers, great for borrowers, great for job creation, great for Britain. Where do the Tories, where does the coalition government put their bets? On Wonga? Again, why don't they just get a gun and start killing people in the streets? It would be quicker. Because that's what they're doing, asking them to do austerity at the same time. So we're going to ask you to suffer through austerity while we let Wonga take that last 5p from you. This is not right.
Okay, so hopefully P2P will come in, or someone will crowdfund an alternative to Wonga, is what you're saying.
Well, okay, let's say we crowdfunded George Galloway. Let's say he's the mayor of London. Let's say he says we're going to make Zopa our main source of funding, borrowing in this country, and we're going to put Wonga out of business, as they should be. As they, if you eat rancid meat, remember the horse meat in the lasagna scandal?
Yes.
People freaked out. Well, Wonga is much worse than that. You got 5,000% interest rate in your loan. That's much worse than horse meat. If you're not outraged by that, then go eat dog shit, because you're not even worth living. If you're not outraged by Wonga, kill yourself.
Okay, point made on that. All right, you've heard it here first. You got horse meat and Wonga. It's official. Max Keiser and Simon Dixon will be funding George Galloway's race for mayor, hopefully next year. It's exciting stuff. You can go to banktothefuture.com to check out Simon's company, and you can go to startjoin.com to check out yours.
That's
and
right.
Check out the front page, right?
That's right.
You both are on Twitter, at Max Keiser, at Simon
Dixon Twit, at Bank to the Future.
And at Bank to the Future as well. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being on. It's always a pleasure having you here, Max. Please come back and co-host again, maybe on a Silicon Reel, maybe not.
Great.
And I'll bump into you in the neighborhood. If you're listening to us on iTunes, you can come see our beautiful faces and see what Max is wearing on our channel, YouTube, London Real TV. We're on Facebook. You know the deal. It's about the journey. Thanks for being here, guys. I wish you both the best.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, take care. This week on London Real, former MI5 intelligence officer turned whistleblower, Annie
Michonne.
What we're looking at now is a de facto police state. You know, all the laws are in place, they're just not being applied to most citizens yet. I think it's not a case of having anything to hide. It's having a case that I have a right to privacy, and I can't guarantee my government will uphold that right, therefore I need to take the steps to do it.
She talks NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden.
He would die for his country. He wants to try and improve the way his country operates within its own boundaries and protect its citizens. And we seem to forget and think that human rights are a luxury. They're not, they're fundamental, and privacy is one of them.
On Sunday, London Real presents Annie Michonne, whistleblower.
So it's a very British mess, is the short answer.